Here are some ways to avoid burning out in relationships, especially in partnerships, in romantic partnerships, or even in friendship. I was inspired to do this because I was considering something that's been really trendy, which is talking about 50-50 relationships. I think it's been trending for over the past few years now. And I was inspired to think about what are other ways that 50-50 type of dynamics can show up. They're not necessarily related to finances. So I kind of played around with the idea of an emotional 50-50 relationship. I'm not sure if that's really what I want to stick with the 50-50 tagline. But basically what this idea is just patterns or behaviors or actions you might have found yourself doing when you have been in partnership or even in friendship. I believe that these behaviors can kind of lead to relationships fizzling out or even burnout on your side if you are the one behaving and acting this way when you are in partnership. So I want to mention that these are also behaviors that I have found myself doing when I was not the best at having emotional intelligence or having an understanding of what a fulfilling emotional partnership looks like. And also, I didn't know how to soothe myself during insecure and overwhelming moments. My behavior and my lessons and my understanding from that past is what I've learned now and became another inspiration for this video topic. So let's just get started. And what does being in a emotional 50-50 relationship might look like? You can also consider these behaviors as relationship killers, as intimacy killers, and things and behavioral patterns that can actually prevent you from developing a relationship or create emotional distance in relationships and partnerships. So what does these behaviors look like? This can look like overgiving, over explaining, being the overly emotional one, only seeing your needs as not being met. Probably a lot of problems or a lot of issues that are going on in your partnership that seem to only be about you and only about your needs not being met. This can also look like actions or behaviors that you do, that you perform, only satisfies or validates yourself in your partnership. And the best way that I can simply put this is when you're in partnership or when you're in a friendship or in a romantic relationship, it feels like the actions that you do, the words you say, and the dynamics that go on, the situations that go on, are only occurring to validate yourself and to prove that you're worthy or valuable in this relationship. So, again, some actions or some examples of these actions can be like texting your partner just to prove that they will respond back. This can also look like arguing or creating an argument just to prove that your partner is willing to fight for you or willing to prove your worth. This can also look like being self-sacrificing and acting in self-sacrificing ways so you can feel like your partner owes you something, or keeping your back pocket things that they might owe you for because of your self-sacrifice that you've done for them. This can also look like needing your partner to have the perfect script. They need to say the perfect things. They need to have the perfect tone and words just so you can feel heard. They don't use the perfect script, or they don't speak in the way that makes you feel heard. It feels like they're just saying everything wrong and they're not listening to you, that the communication is off, and that you are never fully heard in communication with your partner. Another big one is expecting forgiveness from them, but withholding it from them, again, so that they can fight for you or they can prove themselves to you, and so that you can feel like the prize again. And lastly, what I have on my list is interpreting your partner's behaviors, their actions, their words, and especially their silence as something that's destructive or negative, as evidence that you are in the wrong partnership. after you have decided the meaning for that situation. So, for example, they could not text you back for a few days and you are already creating the meaning. You're creating the context to a neutral situation. Or maybe they said something to you and then they went silent and you are already creating the narrative of what's going on in their minds. It's always in a way that's destructive or negative and basically will always end in the relationship ending. So I'm sure you can see how all of these behaviors and all of these actions can be very emotionally draining and can create so many negative dynamics. You might be in a very healthy partnership. You might be with a very healthy man or woman or partner, but for some reason it just feels like everything that's happening, every action you do is either destructive to the couple bubble or it's always ending up with you having to do more to prove your worth or to save the relationship or to kind of control the path of the partner of the relationship. This tends to happen if you are not very clear with your boundaries. If you're not clear on your values and what you expect from yourself. I'm only going to be talking about things that you can personally do because I don't believe that you can actually control the other person that you're in a partnership with. It'll be very difficult, and it's definitely not something that's healthy or something will create change. I believe that if you change your behaviors, if you change what you're inputting, it's going to create a different outcome. When we are in partnership that bring out our wounds, that bring out our worthiness issues, that actually just show to us how uncomfortable we are with silence, with the unknown, and how uncomfortable we are with not being able to control the other person's actions, reactions. I would say that the root cause of these behaviors is from the idea that if we manipulate, I know that's a strong word, but if we manipulate the situation, if we control how we are perceived by that other person, then the reaction will be different, the outcome will be different. However, one of the most important values that I would say when you find yourself in these patterns is understanding the boundary of I'm the only person in control of myself. This value is really important because it actually releases you from wanting to change the other person, from wanting to save the other person, or wanting to control how they react to things. Another important value to have is I'm the only one who can validate myself. We're in partnership and we are with this person that we love and we care about deeply. One of our learned behaviors from childhood is kind of like expecting someone else to validate us, someone that we love and care about, and someone who's in our environment kind of comes in and manifests in partnerships where we expect our loving partner to approve of us, to show that we're worthy, that we're worth fighting for, that we are valuable, that someone who is individual and unique and worthy. When we're behaving in ways where we start actually wanting to receive that from them rather than doing it for ourselves or validating ourselves, assuming and knowing that we are worthy ourselves, we start putting that responsibility on someone else, on our partner. When we are someone who is whole and complete and we're our individual person, I think in partnership that boundary starts becoming a little bit more blurry. We start expecting our partner to become our source of validation, and we start expecting them to constantly, when we start putting that authority, we start putting that responsibility on someone else, we start doing behaviors that are kind of anti self validation. We start placing excess meaning on their words, on their silence, on their actions. We start determining what they're doing and what it could mean. And whenever we do that, it either adds to our value or it takes away from our value. So, for example, we could see our loved one blowing up our phone and giving us a lot of loving messages and text messages, and we associate that, we place the meaning that they love us, that they care about us, and that we are valuable and worthy, and we are a priority. But what if a few days later they start pulling back and they don't message as much for whatever reason? They don't shower you with messages or calls or whatever. And you might experience that and then associate the meaning that losing interest, that they don't care or that you're not a priority anymore. So, what does that do? That association and that meaning will naturally make you question your worth and your value. Such a common pattern that happens in partnerships because we start putting people on pedestals and we start requiring things of them when we can just allow them to be their own person, be a whole and complete person that doesn't need to constantly validate us. And these behaviors can become really destructive to the relationship if they're not dealt with early on. I would leave you with learning how to be comfortable in silence and learning when is the right time for you to be pulling back from your partnership. When you're starting to feel insecure, when you feel unworthy, when you start seeking for the answer, the solution, or the validation from your partner, these are moments when you need to communicate that you need some time to self soothe and to um, regulate yourself and just pull back and not exceed such high expectations for another whole and complete person who's outside of you. And this is when you have to become comfortable with the skill of being alone and self soothing and self validating, being ready to come back when you are feeling whole and complete and worthy again. But only you can do that for yourself. When we start replacing seeking them out for validation, for messages, for affection, for whatever that will make you feel wanted and desired, and we start pulling back and giving that to ourselves, this is going to change the relationship dynamic. It's going to create less stress. This is going to create less emotional drain from yourself. And you'll finally be in a respecting, fulfilling relationship. So if you felt in the past, or maybe you're currently feeling it now, how emotionally one-sided the relationship could be, really consider you to reevaluate what you have done, what you have input in the relationship, and what have your patterns and behaviors have shown. Are they out of respect for your partner, out of respecting their space and their decisions and their way of self-soothing? Or have your patterns, have your actions come from, I need to feel better now, I need to feel secure, I need to know that this is okay right now, and if you cannot give that to me right now, you're in the wrong and I have to self-sacrifice another way. Yeah, I consider you really reevaluating how you have affected the dynamic, the energy of your partnership, and if any of the actions resonate with what you've done, this can be reversible with appropriate communication and owning up to your mistakes, forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness. So I'll see you in the next one.